the hated wife. Deuteronomy 21 introduces a bizarre set of laws, but it also uses bizarre language to describe these laws. In Deuteronomy 21, this is what we read. If a man has two wives, one beloved and the other despised or hated, and they bear him sons, the beloved one and the despised one, and the firstborn son is from the despised one, then it will be on the day he, the husband, bequeaths his property to his sons, that he will not be able to give the son of the beloved wife birthright precedence over the son of the despised wife, the real firstborn son. Rather, he must acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the despised wife, and give him a double share in all that he possesses, because he is, this firstborn son, is the first of his strength. Then he has the birthright entitlement. Now, the language used here is a bit offensive. It says a wife that he hates. If a man has two wives, one beloved, one that he loves, and the other despised, the one that he hates. Such a mean thing to say. Why does the Torah say it that way? Just say, he has two wives, a wife he loves, a wife he doesn't love quite as much. I think that would be appropriate. But when you say a wife that he hates, what is he doing married to her if he hates her so much? Why would the Torah talk about this or talk about it this way? Now, just so we understand the context here, it's not talking about polygamy here. No. What the Torah is about to tell us is that when the man is married to these two wives, one of which he loves more than the other, he has to treat the child who is biologically born first as his firstborn. He shouldn't give in to the temptation to treat the child that he loves more, in other words, the child from the loved wife, as his firstborn, if that child is in fact younger. That's going to be the point of the Torah here, not about polygamy. It's about inheritance. But why would the Torah use such a German phrase to describe this wife that he loves less? A sinua, a hated one. Okay. Why would the Torah call her the hated one? The answer I would like to suggest is that the Torah is playing a little game with us, because it turns out that word, sinua, appears before, and only one time before, in the entire 5 books of Moses. There actually is a woman who gets called that, a real live woman in the narrative section of the Torah, who is called sinua, hated. Who do you think it is? That's riddle. Leah.
Jessica?
No, it's Leah. Leah, Jacob's wife, was actually described using the same word, sinua, hated. In Genesis 29, and Yahweh saw that Leah was hated, so he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. It's kind of interesting that actually the situations also match up. Jacob's family situation matches up exactly with what is being described here in this legal section of the text. Jacob did have 2 wives, one which he loved more than the other. Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. More than that, these 2 wives both had children. The firstborn child of Leah was Reuben. The firstborn child of Rachel was Joseph. the situations do match up. Think of the implications. The Torah is telling you that the Jacob man has to treat Reuben, the oldest child, as his firstborn, and can't treat Joseph, who is relatively younger than Reuben, as his firstborn instead. So that's what the Torah is saying. You cannot treat Joseph as the firstborn. You have to treat Reuben as the firstborn. That is why Deuteronomy 21 tells us, if a man has two wives, one beloved and the other hated, it's like the Torah here in Deuteronomy is leveling this retroactive kind of criticism of Jacob and saying he didn't do it the right way. Or at the very least, it's saying that in the future, you can't do it that way. You have to do it differently. Great. So the scholars of Kingdom of Kings, we found one word, hated, sinua, and we matched it up over here and there, and great. Jacob's family situation also matches up. But how do we know that it's real? Maybe we are just getting carried away with ourselves here. We would have to have some other compelling evidence that the story that is being told here in Deuteronomy, the legal text of the Torah, really is patterned after Genesis. Does that evidence exist? Yes, it does. It comes in the form of three awkward phrases that seem to be out of place in the Deuteronomy narrative. I want to point out these phrases. In verses 17 of Deuteronomy 21, it says, rather, he must recognize. Yakir, recognize. Okay. He must recognize the firstborn, the son of the despised wife, and give him a double share in all that is found in the father. When it talks about the father's obligation to give the double portion to the child of the less loved wife, there is a certain awkward repetition in that phraseology. What it actually says is the firstborn child of the less loved wife, he must recognize to give him double portion. But that is sort of a repetition. You could have just dropped the whole recognize thing. If you want to just save words or space or word count, you can say the less loved child, you have to give him a double portion. It's as simple as that. You don't have to put the recognize there. What do you mean you have to recognize him to give him a double portion? Also, the statement, in all that is found in the Father, what is that supposed to mean? It says, in all that is found in the Father. Is a little poetic. Rather, he must recognize the firstborn, the son of the despised wife, and give him a double share in all that is found in the Father. What's that supposed to mean? It means the Father's estate. When it says in all that is found in the Father, it's referring to the Father's estate. Why talk about the Father's estate using such language? In all that is found in the Father. So put that in your spirit. And then finally, it tells us, because this child, the firstborn, is the first of his strength. This is a very poetic phraseology. First of his strength. The whole section here is legal prose. What's the poetry dropping in here for? What is it for? We're not in the narrative part of the text where you can use this poetry. We are in the legal part of the text. So what is this poetry doing here? Plus, it's superfluous. You just leave it out. You could just say you have to give him the double portion because he's the firstborn son. Simple. Why this poetry is the first of his strength? Too much going on here. But it turns out that it is not just the sinua piece, the hated, wife. That brings us back to the story of Jacob. It's all of these awkward phrases. And once you see that, it turns out that everything that's happened here in Deuteronomy 21 is actually a commentary on what happened back in Genesis. And Genesis is going to help us understand what these laws are doing here. Deuteronomy 21, verses 15 to 17, is a commentary on Jacob's story. It's a commentary on the book of Genesis. Those who have read some of the books that we have written, you would see that we always go back to Genesis. We always take Ruth and we say there's an echo of this. Esther is an echo of this. Jonah is an echo of this. We always go back to Genesis. Now, these are the words that we have that we're going to find. Where have we heard these before? So that we can make sense of what the book of Deuteronomy 21 is telling us. Sinua, which is the hated one. Yakir, which means recognize. And then the first of his strength. This is what we're going to look at to show you what Deuteronomy 21 is trying to portray. Let's start with the end. The first of his strength. That poetic phrase was the exact same poetic phrase that Jacob himself used to describe Reuben, his actual child of the hated wife. When Jacob gives blessings to all of his children, the first words of the blessing that he gives to Reuben is this: Reuben, you are my firstborn, my strength, and the first of my might. He addresses Reuben as such. We see that same language borrowed in Deuteronomy 21:17. So this matches when we say, where have we heard these words before? It brings us to this one time that Jacob addresses Reuben as his strength, my strength, and the first of my might, the first of his strength. Let's continue. Now let's go to the middle phrase that we were concerned about, Yakir, to recognize. Why use this awkward phrase? Replay this word over and over in your mind and ask yourself, what do it remind you of in Jacob's life? Yakir, recognize. That very word shows up in the most chilling moment in Jacob's life. The moment when he realizes his beloved child, the child of his beloved wife, the child that he might have hoped to be his firstborn, Joseph, is gone missing forever. Okay. When the brothers sell Joseph, after throwing him in a pit, we know that they slaughtered a goat and put the blood on Joseph's coat. And they brought the coat to Father. And what did they say? Genesis 37. Let's read from 32. And they sent the fine woolen coat, and they brought it to their father, and they said, we have found this. Now recognize whether it is your son's coat or not. It's the same words in Deuteronomy 21:17. It says, rather, he must recognize the firstborn, the son of the despised wife. Jacob's children are telling him with the coat stained with the blood of a goat. They said, we have found this. Now recognize. We hear an echo of this in Deuteronomy 21. It is the same words. Why is the Torah doing this? Is it just being cute with us? Not at all. It is explaining things to us. You want to really understand what the brothers were saying to their father when they presented him with the bloody coat. Deuteronomy is going to teach you what they were saying. Go back to those awkward words in Deuteronomy. Recognize. What did that word signify in the legal text? What do they mean? Well, recognize means that the father has to recognize who his true firstborn is. And then look at Genesis. It says, we have found this in Deuteronomy 17, we see that same language. In all that is found in the father, which is his estate. So found to him were the words that described the father's estate. So we see two key words here. He has to recognize who the true firstborn is. And then in all that is found in him, that is the father, is describing the father's estate. Now take the connotations of these words from Deuteronomy and now plug them back into Genesis, and you will understand what the brothers were actually telling their father. They were saying, Dad, this is your estate. That is the coat. The coat that they had in their hands was their father's estate because they used the word, we have found this. They were saying to Jacob, this is your estate. They weren't just saying, do you recognize whether this is Joseph's coat? They were saying, do you recognize whether this ought to be Joseph's coat? Does this have to be Joseph's coat, Father? They were saying, do you recognize whether this ought to be Joseph's coat? What are the words in Deuteronomy? The father must recognize the right of the child that was not loved as much. Recognize whether this is Joseph's coat. Does it belong to Joseph? Or maybe it doesn't really belong to him. What was this coat after all? It was the coat of the firstborn. Now listen to the name Joseph. The name Joseph means added upon. Isn't it a strange name? Enlightening of these laws. What happens to a firstborn? He gets an added portion. What did the father, in this case, Yaakov, what did he add for this child who means added upon, Joseph? He added his coat. By the way, you see it. When the brothers strip him of his coat, strangely, the Torah mentions the coat twice. Genesis 37. Now it came to pass, when Joseph came to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his coat, the coat of many colors, which was upon him. Why mention it twice? Because there were two coats. One coat all the brothers had. They all had their coats. Everybody had a coat. But the other one was an added upon by the father. It's a double portion. That coat meant he is my firstborn child of the loved wife. Forevermore, the Torah is telling us, look at the pain and suffering that choice caused. Look what the brothers said to their father without really being able to say it to him. At face value, all Jacob had was a forensic question. Who does this coat belong to? But the brothers longed to say so much more. It was hidden in their words. They couldn't bear to confront their father directly, and the reader just wonders, what if they had? What if they had gathered the courage and confronted Jacob? What if they have been able to? How much pain would have been saved if they only could have told their father instead of selling their brother? In the end, Deuteronomy gives us an insight into the brothers' thinking that we would otherwise not have access to. And Deuteronomy patterns its law in such a way to make sure that that pain won't happen again. That brothers in the future will not have to cry over their father and then another sale of Joseph with its dramatic, painful ramifications for all of Hebrew history will not take place again. If a man has two wives, one beloved and the other despised, and they bear him sons, the beloved one and the despised one, and the firstborn son is from the despised one, then it will be on the day he bequeaths his property to his sons that he will not be able to give the son of the beloved wife birthright precedence over the son of the despised wife, the real firstborn son. Rather, he must acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the despised wife, and give him a double share in all that he possesses, because he is the first of his strength. Then he has the birthright entitlement. Can we apply this law to Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar? I think it's something that we need to revisit.